Hey everyone, welcome to the Coach Catalyst podcast. This show is about helping you grow as a coach by standing on the shoulders of giants. Each show, you get a different mentor in your ear. The early motivations, the successes, the failures, the tools, the tricks, and the insight into where the industry is going. All of it so you can make your own dent in the world. Remember, success leaves clues. Now, without further ado, on to the show.
Hey, what's up? Welcome back to another episode of Season 3 of the Coach Catalyst podcast. I'm your host, Trevor Whitmer. On today's episode, I have the pleasure of speaking with Rick Mayo. Now, if you've been in the industry for a while, you know that name. Rick has been in the industry for 30 plus years. He built his own facility. That facility turned into a license that was in gyms all over the world, over 2,000 gyms all over the world. And then he's since morphed that into a franchise called Alloy Personal Training. You've probably heard of Alloy if you've been in the fitness world, because they've grown exponentially, very, very quickly in the franchise world. And we talk all about it on this episode. This episode really digs into him building Alloy Personal Training. We talk about the struggles, the things they did well, the trajectory, and really just building a business that scales massively. And so if you have one location and want to have 2, 3, 4, 5, this is going to be an episode that I think you're going to get a lot of takeaways from. So without further ado, I hope you enjoy this episode with Rick Mayo and Alloy Personal Training. Rick, welcome to the Coach Catalyst podcast.
Trevor, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I'm really excited to be here. I've followed your work for a really long time, and you've been in this industry for a long time, and so it's awesome to see what you're doing. And now, what we're really going to talk about is this kind of next venture that you're on, kind of the next generation of stuff. So, tell me a little bit. Let's just start for anyone that's not familiar with Alloy. Tell me just kind of the quick elevator pitch on kind of what Alloy is.
Yeah, so it's a full-on franchise. So if you aren't familiar with franchising, think about, not that there's a perfect analogy, but think about a Chick-fil-A or a McDonald's. I'm just naming fast food because they're everywhere. Yep. Which means like our name's on the front door. Maybe some common fitness franchises would be like Orange Theory, things like that. So we are now in a full-on franchise model, a couple hundred, maybe 250 now sold, and getting them open and keep growing, which is great. But the model is based on personal training, and it's personal training in a small group setting, which I think that's important. When you use the word small group personal training, yep, a lot of people use that term, but it just means a lot of things. You can say that, and there's 20 people in the group with you. So for us, that definition is 6 or less people. And we feel like that's the number, like one coach coaching 6 or less people at one time. And we feel like that's a good number to offer a good value proposition to the customer, the consumer, but also still be able to keep the brand promise of personal training. And we started this model in like even before year 2000, believe it or not. So if you think about just trial and error, everyone will say, why 6? And it's like, well, we tried 4. That was too few to be able to offer the right value proposition. You get above 6, it starts to feel like a class. We often refer to that as like the C word in our organization. Like we don't use the class word, right? Because that's got pricing and service anchors. So it's a model based on a small footprint of 1,500 to 2,000 square feet, 130 to 150 members, and that's purposeful. And you got one coach in the building at any given time coaching 6 people at a time. So super simple.
So why the franchise model versus like a license model?
Well, we ran a license model for 15 years. Okay. So 15 years leading up to franchising, we had 2,500 door fronts from India to Dubai, Tasmania. I mean, any kind of weird place I can name, but obviously tons in North America, South America, Central America, Europe, Australia, New Zealand, everywhere, right? And so we had a pretty good lens on I don't know anybody that grew a personal training licensing company bigger than 2,500 doors. That's pretty big. And in that, we were engaged with some of the largest fitness franchises in the world at the corporate level. So you're sitting on advisory boards for, really, really the biggest, some of the largest overall franchises, not just in fitness. And so we got a peek under the covers of how franchising works. And we had more and more people approaching us about powering their franchise. And then it started, and the newcomers to interest in us were boutique fitness, which is kind of what we are. And I was like, well, wait a minute. Like the other brands were more like general health club brands, and we would install and operationalize some kind of coaching mechanism to drive up their average unit value or like revenue in a location. And so when boutique fitness started to approach us, we're like, instead of powering everyone else's franchise, we should just pivot and do our own. So we did do licensing at really high scale for 15 years before we even went to franchising. So we did have that phase as well.
So did you, when you then went to the full-on franchise, did you decide to shut the licensing down, or could they operate in tandem then?
We quit selling it. We still service some of that legacy revenue, and there's a certain churn rate month over month.
Right.
And so that churns down slowly as franchising grows, and there's some intersection, and we will sunset that business at some point. We're just not to that point yet.
Right. So, I mean, as far as this concept, I mean, we've seen this evolution, right? Move from, 20 years ago being very heavy one-to-one. And then we kind of moved to this like semi-private, call it whatever we want to call it, which was kind of 2 to 3. And now it's kind of moved into this 5 to 6. And so this was an evolution you guys had at your facility, right? Like you guys were doing it.
Yeah. I mean, look, I think it happened for us somewhat organically. And well, I don't know if we were the first to do it, but we had to be close because like 1999 is a long time ago to start, training people in groups purposefully.
Right.
And so what we found, and I think this makes sense to anybody that's in the industry that might be listening, is, let's say you're doing one-on-one training and someone's like, hey, can I bring my friend? And you're like, sure. They might pay a little less per person. The gym makes more per hour. I'm helping more people. There's more margin in those hours, so I can pay the coaches more. So it's kind of like, this is interesting. Then they might say, well, we have another friend that we play tennis with, or is in our golf threesome or whatever. It's like, sure. They bring a third person. It's like, doesn't take away from their experience. We're making more money per hour. We're helping more people. Gym makes more money. Coaches make more money. I'm like, this is pretty cool. So in that year 2000, somewhere around that time, we're doing about 3,000 one-on-one sessions a month. So it's not a broken business at all. And we simply saw the writing on the wall, ripped the Band-Aid off and said, this is where things are going. Because we can charge less, we can help more people, we can make more money, and that's a good thing, right? And so we ripped the Band-Aid off and moved all of our one-on-one clients into what we were calling at the time semi-private, which now we call personal training a small group. But same, it's just nomenclature, right? It's changed, but it's the same service. So that's how we got there, was just empirical evidence, right under our noses in our facility that said people pay less, they have more fun, there's more professional boundaries between coach and client. Coaches can make more, facility can make more, we can help more people. So there's altruistic reasons, financial reasons, all the way across the board. It was just a win-win. We just needed to, and we were proving it, again, loosely, but we needed to do the dead on, like, this is what we do as a company, as a full-on business model. And I mean, we didn't take that lightly. It's sort of like you asked earlier about going from licensing to franchising. It's like the opportunity cost of leaving a business that has 2,500 door fronts from all over the world to chase something bigger even. It's not an easy decision. It was not easy even at the time to leave 3,000 one-on-one sessions a month, to risk that, to tell everyone, hey, I know you've been working out on your own, but guess what? Now you're going to work out with friends. It's like, it wasn't well received early on. Always, I liken it to, Henry Ford saying like, look, if I asked people what they needed, they would have said faster horses, right? They didn't know what a car was. They couldn't even conceptualize it. So in some ways we had enough empirical evidence from people that were doing it to actually just do it, right? Without getting like prior approval, if you will. And I think there's a lot of head trash around that, certainly for people that are still doing one-on-one training who are like, hey, I might want to think about doing this. It's like, my clients are going to hate it. It's like, of course they're going to hate it. Everyone hates every change that you ever make. Then they like it. They don't know that they'll like it until you do it, right? And so I can say that now confidently, speaking from experience and literally betting the house on it, literally, as a business model, and it's well received. That's so far so good. But yeah, that's how we got there. And that's why we decided to pivot to that model.
The Super Coach Summit by Coach Catalyst is.
The Super Coach Summit by Coach Catalyst is.
The Super Coach Summit by Coach Catalyst is.
The Super Coach Summit by Coach Catalyst is room for opportunity.
It's badass. It's fucking awesome.
Over-delivered. They talked about it, and they definitely did it.
Is amazing. It's just been invigorating.
Is exemplary. It's phenomenal and just a great time with great people. And you feel like in Ohana, you feel like a family.
It's unreal.
Is awesome. What will help separate the 1% from the 99%.
Is a really well thought out event, well conceived, well planned, and well executed.
It's such an amazing event to be at in order to grow your business and network with other professionals.
It is top tier. It's one of the best I've been to in the business. It's been unbelievable, and I'm just excited to finish out the day here and keep making connections.
It's an event that you will be very happy that you have attended, because next year is going to be even better than this one.
Is freaking badass. If you're not here, you're missing out. See you next year.
just because there might be some people listening that are doing a one-on-one and they want to move to more of a small group training model, how did you overcome some of the maybe negativity or objections that, people had? How did you kind of smooth it out a little bit?
Yeah, I think one of the advantages of personal training is you have a unique relationship with your customer. They will do almost anything if you've earned their trust, right? And so knowing they trusted us to have their best interest in mind, most people, not all, most people knew that they would say, well, I guess, I'll try, but if I don't like it, I'm not going to do it. It's a little bit of that, but they had done other things that we did that they didn't want to do, change their eating habits, start exercising regularly, all the things that we had talked them into already that didn't end up being anything negative in their life. So we had some inherent trust built already.
Right.
And there's a lot of research around the reason why doesn't matter as much as there just needs to be a why. So I can always think back to these, and we've studied this. This is old, behavioral science around. I think a study was done where people are trying to cut in line, and if you just said, "Hey, can I cut in line?" and say it was like at a busy coffee shop at a time when people are trying to get to work, they'd be like, "No, get out of here." But if you were like, "Hey, do you mind if I cut in line? I'm super busy. I got to get to work." People would be like, "Oh, okay." And I'm sure later they're like, "Wait a minute, I'm trying to get to work too." But the fact that you just gave them a reason, it was some 90% or something of people would allow them to cut in line. So what we did in that case is we knew the coaches had great relationships with customers. We had them go to their clients, and it was literally a just try it for me, right? Because they will do something for you in that way. And the psychology behind that is if someone does something for you, they're more likely to do something for you again and again, right?
Yeah.
Because there may be an experience where they come in and there's like, oh, there's a stranger in here at my time. Oh, it's like, okay, you have to trust me. So once you get the yes to the first ask, you can just continue to ask, and then eventually it smooths over and they end up loving it, right? And so that's how we coached it. It's like coaches are going to tell people, hey, this is the model we're moving to. This is why it's going to cost you less money. You are going to be working out with other people. What we promised, we've got systems in place to keep it personal training. We found that the people that are doing it organically are having a lot more fun, blah, blah, blah. And some people are very hesitant. Some are like, yeah, I don't care. I don't want to talk to you. I'm tired of your stories anyway. There's those kind of clients that are very confident. There's others that were like, no. And for anyone listening that's like, ooh, man, I just know my clients love it. And they love it when I fetch them a towel and hand them their weights and all the things that maybe I thought made our service sticky.
Right.
I could distinctly remember we had one guy, and he was just like, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. He was just that guy, right? He's like, I don't know what you're trying to do. You're pulling the wool over our eyes. I'm like, okay, we're trying to give you more service for less money, if that's what you mean. But okay, he's just that guy, right?
Yeah.
And it was 12 months later. So it probably took a full 12 months to get the last guy on board, right? Where he liked it. I could distinctly remember I was traveling a bunch at the time, but I was in the gym and I was leaving. It's Friday afternoon. And he was at the desk and he was like, hey, I can't make it in Friday morning. What do you guys have Friday afternoon? And the person says, well, how about 4 o'clock? He's like, yeah, great. He's like, wait a minute. Was there any other people in the session? He was like, yeah, there's 3 other people. He's like, okay, good. He's like, I'm not coming to them by myself. I hate that. Now, this is the same guy. I didn't call him out on it. It's the exact same guy who said, I will not do it. You're pulling the wool over my eyes. I hate this. This is bullshit. You're taking the person out of personal training. A year later, he's not even coming in if there's not at least 3 other people in the session with him, right? So I think hopefully just empirical evidence and the fact that the business model works at scale in market, we're seeing that obviously put all of our chips in that, all of our eggs in that basket, would give somebody confidence who's doing one-on-one. You can literally, you're typically not going to quadruple your income, but you can get pretty darn close. So let's just say you're charging $80 an hour. The pricing structure that I would coach people to use when we were doing consulting and then licensing before we got franchising was take the 30-minute market rate in your market, right, for a 30-minute one-on-one session and price your small group personal training at that rate. Mm-hmm. So let's say it's $40 an hour. It's like, well, if you go 6 people now, it's $240 an hour for you, right? Whereas before it was an $80 hour. So you're tripling your income potential. Right. And if you're just someone who's scared of money and it's like a dirty word to you for whatever weird reasons, people have had trash around that. It's like, look, you're helping literally 3 times the people. So how about that for an altruistic reason? Then you might make some more money, give it to charity if you hate money. I get it. But it's not a bad thing. So that's the way that we looked at it. That's how we sold it. It wasn't easy, but we were very convicted and we knew there was enough evidence there. And it turns out we were right. So anybody listening that is hesitant, don't tell me you're in Kansas City and it won't work there. Because like if it works in Tasmania and Cyprus, I'm pretty sure it'll work in Kansas City, right? We used to hear that all the time. Well, my clients, I'm like, oh yeah, they're totally different than ours. Totally different. Same age bracket, same income, right? It's like everything's the same, dude. They're going to be fine. So, but I understand that fear too. I'm just literally just making fun just because I was that same person. It's like, listen, you're going to be just fine. You just need to do it, right?
So where did the name Alloy come from?
When we first started licensing, we had a local name to our one gym. So we'd had a couple corporate gyms, but the one gym was called North Point Fitness. And that's just the area north of Atlanta. We're in the suburbs. Everything around here is called North Point. There's a mall, there's car dealerships, everything's North Point. So we were just North Point Fitness. And so when we started licensing, we took it out. I think we first started with a couple of Gold's gyms. And they were like, hey, what do we call this thing? I'm like, I don't know, call it whatever you want because it's all white labeled, right? Mm-hmm. And they were like, yeah, but we want to, even if it's internal, we want to like sell it to our team. That's this thing. And I was like, oh yeah, you're right. It needs some branding, right? So we hired a firm out of San Francisco and all they do is naming conventions. That's it. So it's a 6-week process. And I mean, they work you through, like get all the details on your brand, who you are, what you're trying to project, who your customer is. And then they also are looking for, is this name free for trademarking? It's not guaranteed, but there's runway there, meaning like someone else doesn't own it in your categories, right? So we were back and forth. I mean, it was an interesting process. We had so many wacky names they came up with. And I think they're just trying to push the boundaries of like what you'll accept. Because sometimes weird is great if it's sticky, right?
Right.
And I remember they came back and they were like, ta-da. Now, mind you, there was no branding at all. It was just a name. And I think it was like $35,000. And this was like 20 years ago. And I was like, oh my God, so expensive, right? But, you looking back, it's like it was really worth it. That's why professionals do it. And when they said like, ta-da, Alloy, I'm like, that's the dumbest name ever. Like, I could have thought of that, right?
Right.
Well, obviously I couldn't. And then when you really looked at what the meaning of alloy is, because the literal Google definition, I have to read it. It's on the wall right in front of me, giant graphic in my office. It's like a metal made by combining 2 or more solid elements, especially to give greater strength. So you think about that. It's like, that works for me too, at that time, our licensees, right? Like a B2B relationship, but it passes all the way through to the consumer, which is really valuable now that we have a franchise because that's franchisor to franchisee and then franchisee through to the end user. That makes a lot of sense. So this whole stronger together idea. Then we took the name to a local branding firm, a really high-end boutique firm here in Atlanta, and they built like the logo, which is like 2 pillars leaning on each other, which makes sense. The only contribution I had was the stronger together part. And that was before, Hillary had used it for her campaign slogan, but you can only get it like in your category. So we have it like fitness, nutrition, things like that. And we have a trademark on that as well. But, it was funny when speaking of that, I was cutting through the airport, like during the whole Hillary versus Trump campaign, and I was wearing my Stronger Together t-shirt and I'd forgotten that was her campaign. And inevitably there'd be some lady or something. She'd be like, that's what I'm talking about. I'd be like, yeah. And I'm thinking, damn, everybody knows Allie. This is awesome. And I was like, oh yeah. I just looked down. I'm like, I don't care. I'm just like, all right, cool. Good to see you. Keep rolling. But, that's how we got it. We hired a naming company first, no branding, no nothing, that looked free for trademarking. Then we started the trademark process and it was clean. So we got it in fitness and nutrition and whatever the related categories are. Then we took it to a branding firm and had all the fonts and the colors and the logos and just all that stuff built out around it. So yeah, it was a really cool process. I mean, there's something to that. If you're thinking of it, it's always like, hey, we'll just name it this. We'll call it like Core, but we'll use a K or whatever. And I'm not throwing shade if that's the name of your business. Don't get me wrong, but there's a lot of that going on. But like maybe let a pro do it if you're thinking about going bigger,
right?
Because like they do, what seems like really easy is not at all. Or I would have come up with something like that on my own, but it's impossible.
My favorite part of the event is...
Favorite part of the event was the networking and the community. It was fabulous.
The energy and the quality of the speakers and information.
So I'd say like the highlight of the event, obviously the speakers have been amazing, but the networking has been great.
The community here, the people, and just those lunches and dinners and hallway conversations. And the presentations have had a big impact in terms of things that inspire me and inform me. So a lot of good things.
The coolest thing about the Coach Catalyst event that I've experienced is one, like Kane, Trevor, and Coach Cap, the energy in the room, the videos, like that stuff matters as far as throughout the day when you start getting tired. People don't realize it.
I would say the best part of the event so far has been the connectivity between the people that are here. It's been comfortable and it has felt very pressure-free.
I like the eclectic lineup, which is different than most other conferences. There usually is like a theme, and this is pretty spread out, which I appreciate. So there's a lot of people bringing a lot of different methods and modalities to the table.
Coach Cab was probably my favorite talk. His energy, the way he speaks, the way he holds himself. I love anything to do with athletes and sport, and if I can take those principles and apply them to business like Coach Cab does, it's unbelievable.
So you guys were self-funding this thing from the beginning, or did you guys be like, hey, we want to bring on investors and, we have a pool of money to be able to build this?
No, I mean, we've never had an investor, even still, which is weird because, a lot of people say, should I franchise my business? I'm like, do you have $10 million laying around? Because if you don't, because that's probably what it's going to cost you to get from startup to like what they call royalty sufficient, which is when you get enough clubs open to cover your expenses with just royalties. And that's a percentage of their each club's top line income, right? Or revenue, I should say. And so it take a long time. And sometimes people get stuck before they get to that and they run out of money. It's really common being underfunded for franchising. So we're a bit of a unicorn in that way. And that's probably the one thing I'm somewhat proud of is that, we've been able to fund the entire thing on our own. So we got no VC money, no friends and family rounds, no nothing. And so I have a 20% partner that bought in when we were licensing, and she was my COO already. And she just basically said, hey, if you don't let me buy in, I'm out. And I really needed her because she's the integrator. I'm the visionary. She's the integrator. And she's a baller. So she bought in at that market value at that time, which was not inexpensive for her to buy in at that time. And so that's it, just the two of us. And so I was listening to a podcast the other day, they're talking about franchising, and it was a private equity guy. He's like, you are a literal unicorn. He was almost saying it like it's impossible, which kind of made me want to do it. He's like, if you get to 100 units open, which by the way, only 2% of any kind of franchise, food, fitness, dog care, whatever, only 2% ever get 100 locations actually open. Most of them get like 5 or 6 and they run out of steam, money or whatever, and then they're gone, right? So if you get 100 franchises open, you're in the top 2%. And this guy's saying if somebody got 100 units open and they had not had any complicated round of funding from weird uncles and family members and it was just clean, just them. He's like, that's a literal unicorn. So I was like, we're going to be there by the end of this year, if not before. And so I'm like, man, if we can do that and be a literal unicorn, that's going to be awesome. So anyway, that's what we're shooting for. But yeah, no funding, no friends and family, no VC, no nothing.
Oh, that's great. What was the biggest hurdle early on, like in the early days? What was the biggest hurdle that you guys had to overcome in order to keep the ship moving?
Are you talking about franchising or just in general?
No, let's talk franchising. Let's kind of stay with the the alloy. Yeah, getting that thing off the ground.
I think, early, of course, timing's everything. And we launched in the December or the late fall of 2019. In the first month, we awarded 8 licenses. And that's confusing because we said licensing earlier, but a location in franchising terminology is a license. So we awarded 8 locations in the first month. And then the world caught on fire. COVID hit. It was like, oh no, because we had this projection of licensing. We were going to keep servicing that revenue. It was going to churn at this sort of 1% a month, while franchising would grow at this much per month. And there would be that intersection that I talked about. Well, COVID drastically accelerated our churn in licensing because that affected a lot of clubs. And if they were on the bubble, sometimes they were gone if they were forced to close for a while. And it basically put a 100% halt on all franchise sales because there were states that weren't allowing any fitness. And so in the franchise world, people were not looking to invest in fitness at all. And so probably set us back a year and a half, maybe a little bit more. So it was probably mid 2021 before we started to see the veil lift a little bit. And there was still a hangover from that until probably mid 2022.
Right.
So we've really only been on it for probably 2 years, right? And it's been fast and furious ever since. But yeah, it was that was our biggest obstacle. And had we not been well funded, there's no way we would have made it through that stage. No shot.
Did you find it challenging? Because the one thing about a franchise, right, is the model has to be very simplistic. It has to be very mechanized and very standardized because you need to replicate this thing all over the place. Did you find it hard to really, because I have a tendency, people in the fitness world want to complicate things as much as possible, right? Whether it's we want to show our own worth, our own value or whatever. But did you find it hard to be like, hey, we need to simplify this thing down to its most basic parts so that we can ship this out all over the world?
I don't think so. I mean, that probably came with the maturity of having already been in the business for nearly 30 years. It's like, scale alone makes things complicated. So what you don't want to do is try to take something complicated and scale it. Like as an example, at one point when we were licensing, we were sort of gun for hire. I mean, we were powering CrossFit facilities, family tennis centers, giant health clubs, cricket training centers in India. I mean, it was all over the board, right? And so there were different applications of what we did in each one of those locations. Way too complicated. And we could scale that, but we got to work them with a lot of entrepreneurs And a lot of them were offering like layered services. And we did that for a while as well. When you're a one-off club, you can do it where you have like team training at, this layer, and then you can do small group personal training. And we also have some one-on-one, and we also have this. And I, sitting on those boards for those big franchises and seeing how complicated things are at scale, it was like, okay, where's their gap in the market? Really, not just what I think is cool, that I like. It's like, okay, there's a gap for people 45 to 65, right, who do personal training now. There's really nothing built at scale that can service them. There's lots of private clubs doing it, which was also a lot of our empirical evidence. A lot of our licensees were doing it, right? It's like, well, where's their gap in the market? Do we have the right machine built to do that? And we knew, even though we had offered all these different layers of service, from virtual to one-on-one to team boot campy stuff to this one, line item of revenue, even in our corporate facilities, was always our secret sauce. It was always where we earned the most revenue. It was always the most unique thing that we did. It serviced the right clientele the right way. So I knew it needed to be simple. So when we went to franchising, it's our fifth core value is to keep it simple. So it was really easy when we got there to be like, all right, this thing needs to be dead simple. 130 members, 150 tops, one coach on the floor, always 6-to-1. And then it sounds simpler than it is. As you know, it's nuanced. It's kind of like losing weight. It's like simple but not easy, right? That's the way I look at what we do as well. But yeah, just experience, really. Like if you're going to scale something, even if you're listening to this and you're like, hey, I want to do a second location, it's like, well, it better be simple, because going from 1 to 2 is a pain in the butt. You might as well go to 10, because that's basically what you're going to be doing. So you got to have systems in place. You got to have all the things. And so thankfully we had been around franchising and scaled another business enough to know if it's not dead simple, it's just not going to work.
Did you get it right with like licensee number 1 or the first franchise, or did the first 5 kind of have to evolve the model a little bit?
Yeah, it was interesting. I think it's a little bit of both. We were lucky. Some of our early franchisees are still our best, right? But we also swung and missed with some as well. We awarded people that we probably shouldn't have early on. And now in hindsight, it's like, oh, there was all these red flags. And when you're wearing rose-colored glasses, you don't see any of the red flags, right? So it was like, because, we were just happy to come out of COVID and start selling some franchises. Right. Like, this is awesome. And we did not have as tight a sales process as we quickly developed once we realized, like, oh no, we brought some stinkers through. And when I mean stinkers, like they could operate, but maybe not the friendliest folks in the world, or, just not the kind of people you want to work with long term. We brought in some people from the fitness industry. And of course, that's always challenging, because like you got to put a moat around their current business and say, okay, you can't expand that. You're just going with Alloy going forward. Trust that your stuff's not going to end up in their facility. That was probably a mistake. Not that we've had that happen at scale, but it's a little bit like, have you ever seen The Founder with the story about McDonald's, and the first few franchises go to people that are already in the restaurant industry, which sounds like it would be great, except they start saying things like, hey, we're going to do spaghetti on the weekends because it brings the kids in, because kids like spaghetti. And they're like, we don't do spaghetti. We do hamburgers, And they're like, no, hot dogs on Fridays. That's what we're going to do. And he was just like, oh my gosh. And so, it's just a complete swing and miss for the first 20 or so, because he had given them to people that were very entrepreneurial, and that doesn't always make a best franchisee. And they had their own ideas about what would work and not work. Right. So I think, yeah, you just got to build something dead simple. And the people you bring in have to be the term that's always used. I hate these like word games, but it's called an intrapreneur, where like you have some risk tolerance, but you're also willing to stick to a system. Right. And so that makes a good franchisee.
Got it.
I'd recommend this to any coaches or even clinicians out there that are looking to build a business around a product that they already really believe in.
As a brand new user, just being sold on the streamline of being able to put everything in a centralized location, anyone that is just fumbling with Google Sheets to Facebook messages, group messaging, text messaging.
For anybody that wants to be able to coach their clients, many times you use different tools and resources, and when you're trying to manage that, even on a Google Sheet or on regular technology, you're limited on duplicating the data over and over.
I think if I'm going to, recommend the app for anyone, it's going to be myself. If I want to take my business to the next level, so definitely looking to do that in the near future here. Everybody can really benefit from it. I use it in the rehab sphere, but I also utilize it in the training thing. You can do the same thing with nutrition, right? There's so many uses for it.
For everybody, coaches, clinicians, anyone that kind of works in the industry, chiros, PTs, trainers.
This is one simple solution that we can create to all of our users and all our clients.
So if you want to create a way to systematize your business so you can scale, I have not seen a better product for that.
And so, I mean, you've been in the fitness industry for 30 plus years, and you've been speaking at different events and in conferences and that kind of stuff. So has that kind of helped you get the first ones, or are you attracting maybe the person that doesn't make a good franchisee because they're already in the fitness industry?
Yeah, I don't even. As a matter of fact, as soon as we saw some early writing on the wall, we don't award franchises to people that are in the fitness industry anymore.
Okay.
Like we quickly stopped doing that. So most of our franchisees are more on the investor level. I say that like they might be casual consumers of fitness. They understand that it does good. They partake in their own personal lives in fitness, but they're not going to be standing in there servicing revenue. And they're buying like 3 to 6 territories at a time, right? And then developing those. So we built it that way on purpose. I didn't want to build a franchise that I was just selling to like personal trainers, right?
Right.
Because there's some financial thresholds, because running out of money on the franchisee side is also detrimental. So there's financial thresholds that you have to meet to be able to qualify. And some people in the fitness industry, of course they do, but a lot do not, right? So that would exclude a good deal of our market. So it's like, okay, let's build it so that somebody that's not in the fitness business can buy it, hire the right people, and run it, right, remotely. Kind of. I mean, we need them to be involved in the business. We just don't need them in there. They don't have to be in their personal training people, right? And of course, that goes back to your idea about simplicity. It's like, okay, well, if that's what we're doing, it has to be dead simple. Mm-hmm. Because you're giving a business model to someone who's not in the fitness industry. And so they don't know all the little nuances. So it's got to be like everything has to be done, baked, fully baked, ready to roll. Like we always say, we're going to build you the perfect bicycle. And there's different kind of bicycles. You can get a mountain bike, a road bike, triathlon bike, whatever you want, right? But we're going to build you the perfect bike, and then you're going to have to get on it and pedal it. So all they have to do is get on it and pedal it. But it's our job to build them the best bike possible. And so, yeah, that was our plan from the start, is to keep it simple so we could sell it to more investor types that would help us scale quicker.
And I mean, were you able to get traction with that early on? Because like you probably have to get to a certain threshold where people are like, okay, this franchise is actually serious. They've got enough going on. All right, now I'm willing to invest $500,000 into these locations, or yada, yada, yada. So did you kind of have to start like with small kind of internal until you hit like that threshold to be able to get the bigger investors?
I think it's a little bit of both. So the franchise marketing is an interesting dynamic. So we hired an outside sales team. The term is called a franchise sales organization. So the acronym that's used in the industry is an FSO. So we hired an FSO, which is someone who works as your de facto sales team. Now they've got tons of experience in not only just selling franchises, but selling fitness franchises. And they represent probably 14 or 15 different brands, none of them competing, but all in sort of the wellness high-end retail space, right? So when you engage with those guys, they are not going to be interested in working with you unless you join all of these consultant networks. Another term for that is broker networks. A lot of the consultants hate being called brokers, but consultant networks. There's probably 4 or 5 major ones in the country. And the way that works is you pay handsomely to have your product on their shelf. So say you pay 50 to 100 grand just for them to put you in their inventory. So imagine you're running a storefront and there's shelves behind you. You want to get on my shelf, you have to pay me, right? So when you pay, you get on their shelf. Now on the other end of that wall are the franchise consultants, and they're working hard to find people that are looking for alternative investment strategies, maybe to leave corporate, right, and go do something else. And so they're out there doing their magic, getting leads through LinkedIn and personal connections and all the things. And they're saying, hey, have you ever considered a franchise? If that person's like, hey, I would like to look at that, they're going to do an in-depth interview. They're going to financially qualify them. And then they're going to go through an in-depth interview. What are you interested in? What do you want the day in the life of to look like? What's your investment threshold? Blah, blah, blah. And then they're going to say, here's a couple of brands. And there's 3,800 out there. Now, they're not all on the broker networks, but there's probably 1,000 at least, right? Mm-hmm. And a lot of fitness. And they're going to have to say, here's one that I think you would enjoy. And it's not always like everybody, you would assume that we're selling against other fitness concepts, but sometimes it's like they're looking at alloy, gutters, and outdoor lighting. You're like, okay. So like, then, the value proposition of alloy is like, outdoor lighting can make you feel good, but it's not like changing lives, right? That's what we do. And so most of the people that choose alloy are really in it because there's some purpose as well. Yes, you can get return on investment. You have to be able to at least present that. But then beyond that, it's about purpose, because there's a lot of ways to make money. You can clean septic tanks. You can do all kinds of stuff. I mean, they don't, you do tree service. I mean, there's everything in the world is franchise, as it turns out. And so that's how you really grow quickly. Now, it's obscenely expensive. Because if you say, awarded a franchise, and our franchise fee is 60 grand as an example, the lion's share of that goes to both the FSO, so the franchise sales organization, because they get a commission, and the consultant that referred the person, right? That eats up like 80% of that franchise fee. So it's a bit of a loss leader for us. And by the time you put the labor in, like getting people up and running and everything, it's like we're behind the eight ball. So that's why that royalty sufficient number is so important. If we don't get them open in a timely manner and get them making money so that our royalties are increasing, it doesn't work. And that should be really comforting to any franchisee to hear that, because like it's in our best interest to get you open and get you making money, because if you don't, guess what? We're also not making money. And so it's the most aligned business model ever. So it's an expensive way to grow, but it's really the way to go if you want to go quickly. It's almost impossible to just grow strictly organic without that. And if you do, like if you look at F45, they had sort of an internal funding arm that was funding, some of their folks that they were bringing in, and maybe those folks weren't as qualified as they should be, which, would slow down sales if you said no. So it's like, well, we'll just create our own funding arm and we can just loan money to anybody that comes around. And that thing turns out didn't work that well. And then that house of cards just started to crumble. You know what I mean? So there's a way to do it with integrity. It just takes a while and it's expensive.
Right.
My favorite thing about Coach Catalyst.
My favorite thing about Coach Catalyst.
One of the things I love most about Coach Catalyst.
There are lots of things I love about Coach Catalyst.
And the reason why I love Coach Catalyst is that
the accountability off the back of that
is simplicity.
The support is amazing.
It allows me to give so much of me to my clients.
It's the drip feeding of content.
I can schedule lessons for my clients in advance.
Game changer for freeing up time.
It gives me my time back.
It's so simple and so easy.
Hi, I'm Kane, the founder of Coach Catalyst, the #1 accountability and communication software on the market today. We help coaches just like you keep their clients accountable and scale their business beyond what they've ever been able to do before. So if that sounds like something you want, let's take a look at how we can help. So Coach Catalyst was built on the 4 C's of coaching. Those are content, communication, community, and consistency. So for content, you need to go beyond just workouts and deliver the whole experience for the client so they get the results they deserve. For communication, you need to own your communication. If you don't own the communication, you don't own the client. So make sure you stop texting clients and use a centralized platform. For communities, get off of Facebook groups and take ownership over your social group with Coach Catalyst communities. And for consistency, the foundation of all results for clients, we took the best-selling book Atomic Habits and built all of these fundamentals right within our app that's going to guarantee to get your clients the best results possible. If you want to start using the 4 C's with your clients, content, connection, community, and consistency, make sure you run over to Coach Catalyst and start a free trial today.
Oh, that's fascinating. I always saw kind of the franchise fee up front. It's always in this kind of like 50 to 100. I was like, why is that so expensive? And so that now makes sense. Like essentially just paying all your commissions to get your leads from that major.
That's it. Yeah. We're making maybe 10, 12 grand out of that tops. So it's like, it's funny because like, franchisees be like, oh, you collect all that money up front. I'm like, no, we don't hardly make any at all. I mean, really don't. Like all of it goes out to the sales organization and the consultant. And it's worth it because it will give you volume and speed. But you always pay for speed, right? So you're paying for that speed. And then you just have to do a really good job on the back end to get them open, operationalized, and making some money. And once you get to royalty sufficient where the clubs are covering your nut, essentially, and you start making profit, then you're cooking with oil, right? Then you just keep your foot on the gas and go. But that startup to that point, because you got to be well funded to hire the FSO and join all these organizations. And you're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars just to get your product on the shelf. Once that's up and running, you just have to have staying power. If you can hang around long enough and get your places open and the model proves out, people are making money, then like you can do really well. The difference is in a franchise, if you do pull it off, the enterprise value is pretty amazing, right?
Right.
The overall value of it, if it gets big, is great. It's just that so few people do it. You better be willing to, you better be able to mitigate the risk of the downside if it doesn't work, put it that way. I wouldn't burn the ships on it, but put it that way.
Right. And so did you get involved with these organizations, sales organizations early on from like day one? Hey, this is part of our strategy to go fast?
I awarded the first 25 or so myself. In the sales process. And it turns out that was a mistake. I thought I was running a pretty tight process, but boy, when these guys came in, there are like 6 or 7 steps that they have to go through. And it's a double vetting process. So say that a potential investor is showing up late to meetings or missing or not keeping their commitments. That's not a good sign that they're going to be a good partner. So we'll wash them out before they ever get to the last phase. So there's all these tripwires set up along the way for both them and us, right? To make sure that we're going to be good partners. And so without that process, we swung and missed on a couple. Some turned out great, some not as much. And we have a lot less of that since we brought those guys on. But I've been with them for 2+ years already. So I think it's worth it.
Right. So were there any moments in the early days where you're like, man, this isn't worth doing?
Yeah. I mean, my partner and I, her name's Suzanne. She's awesome. Business partnership. I always joke about that because she's a little older than me. And I'm always like, you wish you were my partner. And she's like, whatever, but it's like having an office wife, it's hilarious. But there was a couple of times when we were like, man, I mean, you're just like, we joked that like when we were in licensing, everything that we did was like, I think we used to joke like anything you wanted done was like $5,000. It was like, oh, let's have a new graphic made $5,000. We always laugh. It's like, well, let me guess, $5,000. Like, yeah, all right. We start laughing. Franchising's like 25. It's like a whole different deal. And so there was a time when COVID was jumping off, and we were like, man, is this thing ever going to get off the ground? Right? Because we just put things on hold, and we kept servicing our licensees and try to help them get through COVID with some tech solutions and things like that. It was like, yeesh. So yeah, I got pretty sporty there for a minute. I don't know that if COVID hadn't happened, we would have ever gone through that though, because thankfully, a lot of people ask, do you have any direct competitors? And the answer is yes and no. I mean, everything's a competitor at some point, but there's no one doing small group personal training in a franchise structure, certainly at the volume that we are. Now, I'm sure we're going to have a Pepsi jar Coke, but by then we'll have so much market penetration, it won't matter, right? And so thankfully, we have a good runway ahead of us. And if COVID hadn't happened, I don't know that we wouldn't have I'm kind of glad it did because it humbled us quite a bit. Whereas if we had just shot out of the gate, gangbusters the whole way. I mean, I can't say I wouldn't have enjoyed that, but I don't hate that we had to struggle a bit as well, because it really caused us just to build more resiliency, right, around just our organization and make sure we were smart with our money and things of that nature. But yeah, that was it. I mean, COVID was the biggest setback.
Were there any were there any kind of lessons, takeaways from COVID that actually helped you kind of refine maybe what Ally looks like?
Not really. I mean, if anything, like when we were in our states, we had couple corporate locations open. We were in Georgia, and like we were one of the first things to be allowed to open, which I thought was super odd. It was like, remember how they would roll things out like these businesses can open? Right. And it was like tattoo parlors, bowling alleys, and fitness. I'm like, yeah, that's what you need. You get swole, you shove a tat, go throw some bowling balls down the aisle, get drunk. Like, what are we doing? Like it sounded outlandish, but I'll take it. I was super happy. So for us, we were lucky enough to be able to start realizing revenue again. And during that process, I can distinctly remember, because again, 6 people, right? So I can distinctly remember walking through one of our facilities, and there was someone in there, and we were doing some kind of a dynamic warm up, and they were like, man, I can't imagine going to one of those big gyms where there's all those people in there, and like, you don't even know those people, blah, blah, blah. And it was such an odd comment, because it's not like me knowing you personally prevents me from catching a virus from you, but it just spoke to the fact that the business model in those small numbers, it creates more inherent trust at a time when trust is like in short supply. I mean, like, geez, it's a real currency these days if you have it. And the small size of the business really drives that. So I think if anything, we learned that like, hey, this business model is pretty resilient. It really is, even at the most challenging time ever. Right. Another thing, we had an app that we used to drive like vacation workouts and third workouts a week if people could only come in twice. I mean, just, it pulls in wearables, tracks your steps, all those things. So we were using that as like things to do outside the gym, but it ended up being the perfect tool. So we were able to put people in buckets, put coaches in charge of those buckets, and then still personal train them to do it virtually, right? Not run live sessions like a lot of folks did. It was just like, these are the things I need you to do, right? And we'll hold you accountable. Like, you have 20-pound dumbbells at home, great. Here's a workout I need you to do 2 or 3 times a week. Check in, say you did it. You could rate your rank, like how hard it was. All the mechanisms were there. And the app was really built for that, which is great. But it also spoke to the low number, because when you have a personal relationship with your clients, I could say to you, Trevor, like, I'm not going to let you quit, dude. Like, I need you you're going to keep paying, because that's part of, making you do it. Right. But also, like, you've lost all this weight, you've made all these gains in your fitness. Like, you're not going to lose it now and sit around. So like, let's keep this thing going. Well, you can't do that if you're running a boot camp that's got 800 members in there, because you don't know everyone by name. You don't know their personal situation. Right. And so the small size of the model and the intimacy and the high trust, not only did people feel more comfortable when they could come back in, but even when they weren't allowed to come in, we were able to hold them accountable because we had a personal training sort of coaching relationship with them.
So now you've kind of made it to this, call it maybe like a break-even type area. What do you see as, like, with each business, the problems kind of change as the business grows, right? And so now that you're in a different stage than you were in maybe startup time, what are some of the problems that you're running into now, and how are you kind of looking at solving them?
Yeah, I think everyone warned us that there's a weird stage for franchising between sort of 40 and 60 locations open, right? So we've been awarding the last few months like 20 locations a month, which is nuts. I mean, think about 240 a year is like, yeah, we're probably one of, if not the fastest growing fitness brand. It's crazy right now, right? And so, but that doesn't mean anything to me. We talked about what the sales looks like on the front end. Like, we don't get them open and get them making money. So we have to keep up with that operationally, right? And so I would say we're in that challenging stage where some of the early franchisees will probably feel like they're getting less personalized attention because, like, they are, right? To be honest, like, we're still giving them what they need, but they might have been used to just texting someone's personal cell phone and they get a call back immediately. We have like 112 clubs in some stage of like real estate or construction. I mean, it's nuts, right? So it's just not possible anymore. Maybe they used to talk to Jared, who's the VP of, real estate and whatever, and now they've been assigned another person that's on his team that he's had to scale his team or something. So I think there's that little bit of perceived loss from some of the early franchisees. And then, it's just the volume alone. Like, the most simple thing in the world can get so complicated when you put volume on it. But it's not lost on us, and we're doing all the right things we need to do. It just gets really hard, I guess, would be the thing. And so as long as our team is like, hey, it's supposed to be hard. Put it this way. There's a great book out about franchising. It's written by a guy. Gosh, what is his name? Cute, I have it in here somewhere. It's basically, he's out of Australia, and he wrote a book about the franchisor-franchisee relationship, and he equates it to like a bit of like a child and parent relationship, where when you're first born, you need them for everything. It's like a newborn that you can't eat without them, and that's like us. Like, you need us for everything at the start. And you get sort of like 2, 3, and you're like, and you start to wiggle a little bit, like, you don't want to do that, you don't want to do this, right? And then you get to be a teenager, and like, we're the dumbest people ever. Like, your parents are dumbest people ever. And then you get in your 20s, you're like, all right, you're not that dumb, and then you maybe get in your 30s and you have your own kids, and you're like, all right, I don't want to hang out with you every weekend, but like, I really appreciate what you've done, right? And that's a similar trajectory that franchisees take. Not all of them, but some can do that in 6 months, and some it takes years to get through that stages, right? And so just making sure that our team like reads books like that and starts to understand it. When you start having these sticky points of growth, and it feels chaotic, and like, you might have a thing like, our graphics company has been doing that incorrectly on the last 2, and everybody's up in arms. It feels like everybody's mad, right? Mm-hmm. They're not. It's a little bit like when you're in a gym, and I know you've been in the business forever, and you'll hear somebody say like, all of our members hate this. Right. It's like, well, who's all of our members? Like, how many? And it's like 2, but they're the squeaky wheels, right? And then the perception is like, everyone hates it. It's like, calm down. It's going to be fine. It's 2 people and they hate everything, right? So it's a little bit similar in franchising. It's in any business, right? Where we just sort of reach this like tipping point of volume. Now, once you crest that hill, from what we understand, of course, we're there now with 50-ish open and more coming, right? Then you just start to, repeat, rinse and repeat. It gets a bit easier, but there are certain sticking points, and certainly we're in one of those right now. So I'd say that's the biggest challenge, is just not so much the sticking point, but me and our leadership team coaching our team to help them understand everything's fine. It's not us against the franchisees. They're just wiggling and, elbowing their way around in this world, just not unlike a kid who's, doesn't want their parents telling them what to do. And so that's just the facts of the matter, nature of the relationship. As long as we understand that, we'll be fine. But yeah, man, it gets wild when you get volume on something. It gets pretty crazy. Does that help?
Yeah, absolutely. The other question I have, I'm just really curious about this. So, you award X amount. So you have way more awarded than you have open right now. Is there like a drop off rate where it's like, hey, for every 10 that you award, one's going to drop off and never actually, or does it pretty much like everyone's going to get there at some point over the next year, 2 years?
Yeah, I mean, we have a development schedule for people. So they have 12 months to open their first one, typically 12 months for their second one, and then it accelerates if they've done more. So say you buy 6, you might go, 12 months for the first one, 12 months for the second one, then 9 months, then eventually you end up at like every 6 months, right? Because by then you've also learned how to do it a little bit easier. It gets easier for the franchisee as well, right? But we haven't had the terminology in franchising is sold, not open. So the acronym is SNO. So like, you don't want any SNOs. And there are franchise brands out there in the fitness space that have sold a lot who've got thousands, literally, that might be backed up that never opened. And sometimes they just run out of steam or they run out of interest for whatever reason, they don't open. And we don't have any of that. We haven't had anybody that we've sold that didn't open except for one person that had to like move out of the country for some reason. It was a bummer, but I mean, that was it. But it wasn't like they just abandoned it for reasons just because they didn't want to do it anymore, right? Because again, that's terrible for us, right? You heard our business model. Like, we don't get them open, we don't make money. So it's like selling is one thing, but that's the easiest thing to do. Getting them open is the real work, and that's what we're most concerned about. So we don't want any SNOs out there, right?
Right. Oh, that makes sense.
Hey there, coaches. Are you ready to take your coaching game to the next level? Get ready for an unforgettable experience at the Super Coach Summit. Join us at Reston, Virginia on August 24th and 25th, where top-tier coaches from the best in the industry will converge to share insights, strategies, and inspiration. And here's the best part. Lock in your spot with our super early bird tickets. Don't miss out on this limited time offer to save big and secure your seat among coaching's elite. Connect, learn, and grow alongside the best in the industry. Get your super early bird tickets now. Visit virtual.supercoachsummit.com for more information and to secure your spot today.
How have you, so you've kind of, you've been in this thing from the beginning, or at the beginning it was probably you doing as much as possible and everything and trying to do that. And now you've evolved into building out a team. How have you had to grow kind of over the course of the last 3, 4, 5 years in order to continue this thing moving forward?
That's great. I love that question. I'll tell you what, here's what's interesting about growing a team of, and as the stakes get higher, as the opportunity vehicle gets bigger, you become dumber in your organization. I mean that literally. Like, I'm hiring people now that know so much more about their area of expertise than I could ever imagine knowing. That if you go from, say, some of these folks listening, they own one gym, they know marketing better than anybody on their team. They might even be better trainers. They might know leasing. I mean, they know everything, probably more than most people on their team. Well, at scale and in big companies, that's not the case. So what's unnerving is to be a CEO and to hire people on your team that are so much smarter than you are in their area of expertise that you quite literally don't even know what they're doing. Like, the goal is just to set the KPIs that need to happen, lead them well, and turn them loose and let them do their job. So I would say that's probably been the biggest learning lesson from an emotional standpoint. I mean, emotional regulation is like I think it's the key to entrepreneurship anyways, being able to regulate, control your emotions and look at things logically. I mean, I'm literally wearing a t-shirt that says like data over feelings. It's like that's how it has to be, right, for entrepreneurs at the end of the day. And so, but growing a big company where you're literally the dumbest person in the building is really unnerving at times, And so I'm good at like climbing a tree every now and then, looking around the jungle and being like, hey, we're going in the right direction, right? That's pretty much my only function in trying to keep the culture together as we scale. But boy, we're hiring some smart people and I have no idea I know what they do at a high level, but like how they do it, no idea. And that's going to continue to compound over time. And so you just have to be ready for that, because in a really small business, you're kind of the best at everything. Boy, I can tell you what, if I was the best at everything in our company, we would be in big trouble for sure.
And has kind of the entrepreneurial piece, has that been there since the beginning? Because, you started coaching people, you started in the gym world. Has that kind of grown, or has that always been there from the beginning? You've always kind of been looking for that big thing that you wanted to build?
Yeah, I think it's just evolved over time. A lot of people are like, was this your plan? Is your master plan the whole time? And the answer is absolutely not. Like, I had no idea. Now, I think the way it works, if I had to articulate it in the worst way I can or best way I can, but it's probably not great, is like over time you stack skills, right? Like you take courses or you learn things, you make mistakes and you learn and you don't make them again, and you continue to grow as a leader or as an individual. As you do so, you will then by default earn yourself a better opportunity vehicle. Now, as you move into that better opportunity vehicle, you're probably on the hairy edge of your skills, and then you have to move the goalpost and keep going.
Mm-hmm.
And so had I started franchising, 20 years ago, no way I would have been able to do it. I just didn't have the skill set or the knowledge to do it. So over time, as my skills have improved and my knowledge base has improved, so has my opportunity vehicle, right? And right now, I mean, this is as high as the stakes get in fitness, as far as I'm concerned. Like, it doesn't get any bigger than, an 800 unit franchise, company. Like, that's a big deal. And so, but I don't know if I could have gotten here any quicker, to be honest. It's always easy to Monday morning quarterback things and say, oh, we should have done this 10 years ago. It's like, I don't know if I would have been the right guy 10 years ago, if I'm honest, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I would say that, that's at the end of the day, like, if you want to grow and you're in a place now and you want to be in a different place, earn the right to do it. Start upskilling yourself. That will earn you the opportunity to then, if you're at a level 8 skill set and you have one gym, you're probably in a level 2 opportunity. And you might feel bored. You might feel uneasy and like you don't understand why you have this overall anxiety. You sit here on your chest all the time. It's like, well, maybe you're not challenged enough, right? Maybe your purpose is your why is not big enough, or maybe you just need to move into a better opportunity vehicle. And if you've earned the right to do that, great, right? And if not, then upskill yourself. Like, if you know nothing about opening a second location, it's not rocket science. You can Google anything you need to know, right? So anyway, I hope that makes sense. But that is, for me, has been the case, and I don't have any regrets on how I got here, and I don't think I could have done it any quicker than I have, to be honest. And that just might be an indictment on me moving slow, but that's the way I look at it.
No, I mean, I think you're spot on as far as this idea of kind of like earning the right for the next thing. I think too many people, we see maybe we see the end zone and we want to get right there, but you kind of have to get there 5 yards at a time and learn as you go along. Because if you just went to the end zone when you got there, you'd have no idea how to even handle it. Like, the lottery winners always kind of like, that always comes to mind with this. Like, someone just gets, $100 million and then they're broken because like they didn't really earn the right to get to 100 million. They just got it handed to them. So they don't know how to manage that world. And so, no, I think you're spot on. So, what do you see as the future then of Alloy? Is it just simply, hey, let's just find ways to get people open quicker, or are there other opportunities that you're looking at?
Well, obviously, we'll continue to sell locations. So our runway is, conservatively 800 in the lower 48, of the U.S. So it's like, okay, great. 800 locations, lower 48 of the United States.
Where does 800 come from? Where does 800 come from? Is that just like a fun number?
We have some super advanced. No, we have a really advanced software.
Okay.
And we've run, we've run essentially the 150 main MSAs in the country and what our runway is. So these are that's why I'm saying there may be more, because these are home run areas that are target rich environments for alloys, right?
Got it.
And those are all mapped out. So the whole lower 48 is mapped out that way. So great. Go for it, right? And we can sell those. That doesn't even include maybe a backfilling play, like a B play with existing franchisees who are like, hey, I had a pretty big territory. There's a highway or a river or a mountain range down the middle of it. I think like there's a pocket of money on one end and a pocket on the other. I think I could open another one on the other side. It's like, okay, great. And we'll probably get another 10, 20% boost just from that as well. And then that doesn't take into account, Trevor, any international projects. And we've actually have already had some pretty good talks with folks and international master franchisors. And the way that works is you basically sell them the rights to sell it in their country, and you do a rev share with them. And then they make it, lawfully, appropriate in their country. And there's always nuances to different culture where they have to change things up a bit. Labor laws are different, things like that. But for the most part, that's where we'll go. So we'll be continuing to plug away in the lower 48 domestically, and then certainly looking at international opportunities as they come up. They can't be at the distraction of, we have so much runway left in the lower 48. It's like, it'd be crazy to be like, oh, let's go to the UK and then pull any of our team off what we're currently doing. So we would have to be very calculated about that, but that's definitely on the radar. And we've got plenty of great contacts that in those countries that would love to take Alloy, to their local area, whatever that is. So anyway, we'll look at both, but that's our goal is 800 by 2030. And our current pace would put us well ahead of that. But even at that pace, we're happy with that.
Right.
As a coach that runs challenges, I needed my life back. I had stuff all over the place. A Facebook group for community interaction, Google Sheets for check-ins and measurements, and was drowning in email communication. As my challenges grew past just a handful of people, I started to notice clients were falling through the cracks. I began researching virtual assistants because I just couldn't manage it all. And truthfully, the client experience was going down the drain. Luckily, a friend recommended Coach Catalyst and just told me to trust her. I'm sure glad I did. Now I can run my challenges with 2 or 200 clients with just a few clicks. The lessons get delivered on the right days, the accountability happens automatically, and most importantly, the communication is all in one spot. I even created 2 new challenges from the Coach Catalyst library. Best part, didn't have to change a thing. I used to spend 15 minutes just trying to log into all the apps I needed. Now I log in and my dashboard tells me who needs a shout out and who needs a kick in the butt in about 15 seconds. I feel like a huge weight is lifted off of my shoulders. I can finally spend my time coaching again instead of worrying about all the admin work. Do your brain a favor and get Coach Catalyst.
What's the biggest hurdle in getting someone open? Is it just getting the person to actually do the thing? Is it a real estate piece? Is it locations? What's the bottleneck in getting a club open?
Yeah, it depends on the market. So sometimes it's availability of real estate. So if you look at some markets like Nashville or Austin, Texas, where they had a lot of growth during COVID. So if you look at Austin, there was a lot of people from California that moved to Austin, right? Or West Coast. And then a lot of people from the Northeast moved to Tennessee. Neither of those places have state taxes, great place to do business. Maybe whatever, their local government was just overbearing for them. And so they moved into these areas, and they're really nice areas. So those areas are growing like crazy, but there's literally not enough real estate for the population growth, right? And of course, there's tons of businesses going there to support it. So there are certain markets that can be tighter than others. Now, we're still finding real estate in those markets, but that is a challenge. Sometimes it's the real estate. The 2 wild cards that kind of drive us crazy are landlord responsiveness. So some of these landlord groups are huge. I mean, they own shopping centers all over the country and many of them. And to be honest, they just don't give a rip whether you're buying real estate from them or not at times, right? I mean, think about, like, there's always a play behind the play, right? And so when you look at big real estate, sometimes even leaving spaces vacant, but valuing the property, the overall property, on what the rent potential could be. So let's say that you say, hey, we could get $50 a foot for this real estate, right? And you got a giant shopping center. Well, you might really only be able to get 35 a foot, right? But if you wouldn't care if you only leased a couple of spaces, because what you're doing is you're borrowing money against the valuation of that shopping center to go buy another shopping center. And if it's valued at, hey, the potential is to make $50 per square foot in every one of these spaces in this giant shopping center, even if they're only 30% full, you don't even care, because you only care about the valuation, which you can leverage for a loan to get another, when the meat goes on, right? So it's just interesting stuff like that comes up. So landlord responsiveness, and then permitting, because also in these busier cities, sometimes the local municipality is just backed up, and so it's like everything's going great. You get to permitting, and it's like it takes 2 months, right? Sometimes it takes a day. And so those are the 2 wild cards that we really can't control that are somewhat frustrating. But we've got a full-on real estate team that just hounds these poor landlords to death. And we've been able to get a club, I think our shortest ever has been 6 months, which is very unusual because we also have a 3-month pre-sale. So you can imagine, like, from signing to opening with a 3-month pre-sale is obscenely fast. So we've only had that happen once. But they have a year, so somewhere between that 6 months and a year. And right now we're sitting at around 10 months to get from sold to open. Sometimes a little longer, sometimes a little shorter, but that's a good metric. We can keep that. That'll be good. So I'd say that the biggest challenges are that landlord responsiveness in busy markets where they just don't have to. And then permitting from local municipalities can be a bit challenging. And those are out of our control.
Right. You said pre-saling. So how full? So I've seen some stuff on Orange Theory on some of the stuff they do for, like, basically getting a club full before it even opens. And then some. What percentage are you guys? So 130, you said 130 to 150 kind of members in that. How well are you able to do in that pre-sale in those 3 months? Are you able to get it to 50, 75% or get it to break even when you open the doors? Or has that been a challenge?
Well, it depends on the market, but we require people to have 75 the day they open. And so that's half of the capacity. So if you're at 50% capacity, and in a lot of cases, that puts you at break even, if not making a little bit of money. Which, look, if you can open a business, that's the great thing about the fitness business in general, is you can actually pre-sell it. It's not like you open day one, you got to start selling hamburgers. It's like, listen, there's recurring income, right, on the books that starts day one. You're covering your expenses. It's like, that's a good story to tell. Now, we've had clubs sell completely full. So you open with 135 people. So your first month of billing is like, man, it's great, fantastic. But we require you to open with 75 regardless. And we do that because we want that urgency and that push during that pre-sale. Because once you open, even at that low number, and you're servicing clients, a lot of other activity comes with that. And it takes your eye off the ball a little bit with your growth, right? It just slows down a hair just because of the operational constraints of opening a new business and all the things that come with that. So we want them to pre-sale as strong as they can. So 75 is required to open. And then if you crush, we have had people open like completely full. It's not usual because it's tough to do. There's a lot of things, like to you and I, it seems like such a simple business model. But if you, haven't been an entrepreneur, or you're not new to the fitness business, it's like you're drinking from a fire hose. There's like a million little things that you and I are like, it's like playing quarterback in the NFL. If you're Tom Brady and he's in your last year, you drop back and you're like, all right, this guy's going to blitz. This guy goes there. I'm going to throw it to this dude and he's going to go this. I mean, it's like simple to you, right? But if you're like a rookie, you drop back and it's just chaos. There's just like big bodies flying everywhere. And I think new franchisees are more like rookie quarterbacks. And so we have to account for that, right? But 75 to open required. And if you kill it, and it has happened a few times, you open completely full. That's a pretty good story to tell.
And if someone doesn't have 75, you just kind of delay the opening? Is that kind of the play?
Yep. And we haven't missed yet, but boy, it puts pressure on them to get the thing rolling, which is good. We like that.
Right. No, that's awesome. Cool, man. Well, hey, this has been fun. And so we like to kind of wrap up every podcast with just kind of randomness that is unrelated to anything we've talked about so far. So I just have a couple random questions for you, and then I'll let you get off to the next one. So first one, you're in Atlanta, so I can't really predict how you're going to answer this one, but taco, burrito, or quesadilla?
Taco.
Okay. Are there some pretty good taco spots in Atlanta?
There are a lot, actually. Yeah.
Really?
Like I'm from Texas, so Mexican food is my absolute favorite.
Okay.
There's some pretty good places. I would say it's a tie between tacos and quesadillas, just depending. But they're both pretty darn good. Burritos, take them or leave them.
All right. I like it. All right. Next one. If you could live in any cartoon world for a week, what cartoon world do you live in? Is there any that come to mind?
Cartoons, wow. Is South Park a bad place to live?
I think that's the first time I've ever had someone say that, and so I'm gonna take it. I like it. I'm a big South Park.
I'm gonna
fan,
say South Park so I can say and do whatever I want and not get canceled for it. I love it. It's the last safe bastion of saying whatever the heck you want. So I'm going South Park.
All right, I like it. All right, last one. If you could have dinner with any person, past or present, who would you want to break bread with?
Ooh, man, that's a good one. I mean, God, that's kind of a loaded question, and it gets asked often, and then I guess it's a different answer every time. I would say, like, my dad passed maybe 3 years ago. I'd probably have dinner with him one more time. Okay. I mean, you would say like, hey, I'd love to have dinner with Jesus Christ because I'd love to ask him all these questions and whatnot. Sure. Yeah, great. But I think just for today's conversation, it'd be great to sit down like one last time. There's probably a few more things I wish I'd asked my dad while he was still alive. So I'd say my dad.
I love it. I love it, man. Well, if people want to find out a little bit more about Ally, what you guys are doing, where do you guys live on the internet?
Yep. Just go to alloyfranchise.com. That's our franchise site. There's a link to the consumer site if you want to go there too. It's alloypersonaltraining.com, which is the name of the company. There's also a link that'll take you back to the franchise site. So either way, either Alloy Personal Training or alloyfranchise.com.
Cool, man. I love it. Well, I appreciate hanging out and kind of teaching me all about franchising, all the stuff I didn't know.
You know, it was fun. It was really different. Like normally it's like, hey, let's hear your story from the start. But like we stayed on franchising, and I'm sure we got a little bit too much detail. But for anybody that's interested in or thinking about franchising their business, I hope it helped because it's an interesting business for sure. I really enjoy it.
Yeah, it's awesome, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, Trevor. Appreciate it, buddy.
Thanks so much for listening to another episode of the Coach Catalyst podcast. If you are a coach looking to do more for your clients than just workouts, give Coach Catalyst a test drive. Try it for 14 days. Jump on call with your personal strategy coach, Ashley, and see how easy technology can be, all for free. Tell them Trevor sent you. Until next time, keep changing lives.